So in light of the reveal of 007 First Light, showcasing gameplay for the first time and everything, everybody that I've seen talk about it pretty much agrees that the game looks really solid in a lot of ways, but the performance is concerning because what they revealed at the PlayStation State of Play was a roughly 30-minute selection of gameplay. Much of it unedited, just straight through. In it, there's major portions where the frame rate drops into like the low 20s during some of these big set piece moments. And what we were told when I was in Copenhagen at the studio was that that presentation was recorded on a base PS5. Since then, there have been multiple other instances. We saw this in the Discord as well. This was posted by Michael GTG in the Discord. But as you can see, the IO Interactive channel says alpha footage recorded on PS5 Pro, which is directly in contradiction to what we were told in person when we were there. When we were there, they said running on PlayStation 5. We clarified base PS5, and the two guys like looked at each other and said, yes, base PS5. So I don't know what's happening. But there's some sort of miscommunication among the teams. Yeah, a base PS5. Bro. Yeah, maybe that's what they're doing. So there's some sort of miscommunication. We don't know exactly what it's running on. It could be, and what I think is most likely is that there was some communication mishap between like the management at IO, the tech team that was doing it, and the marketing department. The marketing person making the video put PS5 Pro on it, thinking it was PS5 Pro footage when it was actually base PS5 footage. That's my impression. Apparently Digital Foundry is also thinking that it might have been PS5 Pro. In some of the footage they looked at, they saw remnants that they thought could I'm sorry. I just saw this. I didn't realize Trevor posted this. Luke reveals the truth about the candle scandal. I just saw this just now. I didn't know Trevor posted it. That's freaking funny. Release the candle cut. Just admit you like eating candles. Oh my God. That's so freaking funny. Oh, I can't. Anyway, what was I saying? Trevor needs a raise after that one. Anyway, what I was saying was that Digital Foundry apparently has suggested that it might have been a PS5 Pro based on some of the stuff they've seen. But it's just difficult to say because there's been some contradictions back and forth and nobody really knows. All I can go on is that they told me in person to my face that it was base PS5. And so I figure those people would know better than like a marketing person making a video. But who knows? Either way, what we saw did not run super well, specifically in sequences with big explosions. And IGN has put together a performance overview, performance preview video breaking down some of this stuff. So I figured it could be interesting to look at and break it apart because they did actual frame timings and analysis of that. And we can discuss it in a little bit more detail because I think ultimately, no matter how great the game looks, if it runs in the low 20s, it's just hard to recommend anybody get it. I'm sorry. Like, I know we all say that like, oh, well, it's unreasonable to demand 60 FPS in 2025 because fidelity's risen and all that. There's people who say that it should be 30 should be fine. Okay. Even the people who say 30 should be fine should still be upset with 20. You know, moments where it drops to 20. Now, my personal feeling is that this is like an either pre-alpha or alpha build of the game. They have lots of polish time. They reiterated numerous times that the version of the game that currently stands is significantly improved even over what we saw in this gameplay reveal. So I think they're aware of it. And I'm also just glad that they actually showed the game running in real time instead of doing like something running on a 5090 and it's fake gameplay and then we get the game at launch and it runs poorly. I'd rather they know right now that people will not tolerate dropping to the 20s than launch it and then find out. Like if they have to delay it 3 months or 2 months to avoid GTA 6, if they have to delay it a little bit to continue polishing, okay. I'd rather they know that now than launch it and then, you know, deal with that at that point. But let's see what they had to say.
is really quite simple. Bond is a bullet without a target. Let's give him one.
So as you can see there, they put the little flash captured on PS5, mix of gameplay and in-game cinematics. So they are clarifying this is PS5. So they got confirmation that it was PS5. So it's just weird. It's weird that official IO Interactive videos are saying PS5 Pro, but then everybody else is getting confirmation it's base PS5. It's just weird. They need to be more clear about that.
Numbers can be important. Teraflops, resolution, frame rates, but few numbers are as big, famous and enduring as 007. Back with the reboot and change of face in IO Interactive's new game, 007 First Light. And thanks to an extended gameplay reveal this week at PlayStation State of Play, we have a preview of how the younger Bond lives up to the legacy.
Bond. James Bond.
Now, right from the opening moments, it's clear from the team's internal proprietary Glacier engine is at the heart of the game, building on the back of the long-running Hitman games, which never shied away from its Bond-esque muse. This is more action-orientated for sure, mixing stealth, beautiful scenic locales, fast cars, and late-flight check-ins, all of which increase the demands on the engine and hardware running it. From the off, performance may surprise, coming off the back of their 2021 Hitman 3 game, which ran at 60 FPS on current and last generation consoles. Instead, in this preview code at least, they target a 30 FPS rate throughout all the action and real-time cinematics. Visually, the models, density, animation, melee, materials, lighting, and physics are very impressive, and a step up over their last Hitman titles. The engine was one, if not the first, to introduce cloth and ragdoll physics, locomotion, and animation via inverse kinematics back in 2000. This has remained a key pillar in their games and engine ever since, which is ramped up considerably here with a vast selection of destruction, combat, driving, and traversal that clearly stresses the engine and PS5 that all this gameplay is running on, although it also launches on PC, Xbox Series X and S, and Switch 2 in March 2026.
Yeah, so I think the 20 or the 30 FPS target at this point in development is pretty standard. From my understanding, speaking with devs, that this is kind of a common starting point. I would argue, based on what I'm seeing, even if this is a fidelity mode, and we don't know about modes right now, if there's going to be performance mode or if it's just fidelity or if it's just one basic mode, we don't know. But I would say as a fidelity mode, I don't think it's sharp enough to justify being called a fidelity mode. And in terms of performance, the performance obviously is not good enough to warrant like a performance mode title. So I think right now it's just in a weird middle spot where the frame rate is that of a fidelity mode, but the visuals are more in line with a performance mode. And so you're just in kind of like a weird middle ground, you know, where neither is really satisfied, and it just ends up looking kind of weird. But as you can see, when the explosion hits, you can see it's dropping down into like the 20 range, like low 20s when the explosion hits, which is what I would consider to be, we're hitting the unplayable wall. If you don't know, like the whole reason 24 FPS became the standard in film was because back when they were making film with physical film a century ago, they needed to save as much film as possible. So they tried to figure out how many frames per second was the like lowest number while still appearing to be smooth motion. And 24 was what they found. 23, it starts to look like a slideshow. 25 looks better. 24, it's like the sweet spot where it looks smooth enough to get away with, especially if you use like some motion blur effectively by adjusting the shutter speed with the like 180 rule, which is just whatever the frame rate is, you swap the shutter speed according to it. So anyway, but that's beside the point. The point is 24 was considered to be the lowest possible to maintain the perception of smooth motion a century ago. And so to have a video game that's interactive that's dropping to that range or below, I think is just unacceptable. Again, I'm hoping that they make improvements to this before launch, and I'm confident they will, but this is absolutely something that they need to address. This is not like not a big deal. This is a big deal. I mean, this level of performance drop is a big deal.
Physically based but stylized rendering remains from the Hitman series, photorealistic environments mixed with dense crowds, bright skies, pretty people and realistic environments. People and AI remain key, ranging from vast crowds at parties, guard sentries, bodyguards, to military fodder who stand around exploding red barrels and far too fragile Range Rover petrol tanks. So far, so Bond. The Glacier engine supports modern features too, including ray tracing, but it often mixes older techniques up, such as screen space reflections on floors or water bodies, and older planar reflections which can often be confused with ray trace ones. I believe we see the same techniques here, such as the bar top and floors having obvious SSR occlusion artifacts, as does the car reflections in the car park. And we see large-scale, high-quality reflections such as this mirror, likely planar or possibly ray traced, as the engine does support them, although I lean towards planar proxies and SSR, as this shot with young James trying to open the car door, the metallic handle or bodywork does not reflect his hand, which would be a sure sign of ray trace reflections if it did. It may be that this work in progress build is balancing what surfaces and materials use ray tracing, if at all, but the visual style, density and destructibility stands out as a clear step up.
Dude, I just can't wait for the day when, if they say ray tracing, we don't immediately roll our eyes. You know? Like right now you hear ray tracing and you're like, okay, so it's gonna run like crap. And it's just too bad, because ray tracing genuinely is really cool. It's really cool, and it can greatly improve the visual fidelity and quality of a shot. Cyberpunk 2077 is a great example. But for, I'd say probably the majority of games, you hear ray tracing and you just immediately know, so it's going to be grainy, blurry, and it's probably going to run poorly. And that's just too bad. Like, I think I understand the desire for it. I understand why it will offer benefits in the long run. And this is where the industry is going, because it allows for fully dynamic lighting and all that. But it's pretty clear that like the base PS5 and Xbox Series X and S are not built for it. It's just not. Probably the PlayStation 6 and whatever the next Xbox is called, they will be more capable of using ray tracing and running it much better, just like modern GPUs on the like 40 and 50 series are. But as of right now, we're getting these games that are trying to use that like next generation tech, but the hardware is just not quite there. It's too bad.
We do see level of detail switches, shadow cascades drawing in, pop in, and other signals this is genuine PlayStation 5 real-time gameplay.
Yeah, that I remember we looked at this when we did the reaction to it. There are artifacts like this. And again, to their credit, this is an example of an actual gameplay demo. We've had, unfortunately, many examples of largely faked is an aggressive term, but let's just say carefully recorded and selected footage. Like, you remember Mind's Eye? They had all these trailers, and the trailers for Mind's Eye were pretty well put together. They were really smooth, no frame drops, no bugs, no glitches or anything. It looked really polished in the trailers. But then we also heard stories like Mr. Matty Plays attended a virtual preview where he joined a Microsoft Teams call, which already doing a gameplay preview through Microsoft Teams. What? But they did that, and it was so buggy that they literally had to turn on God mode twice during the hands-off demo to get through the preview. And this all the while, all the trailers they're releasing look really, really polished. And so they were very carefully curating, as Scorpo mentions, the footage selection and the reveal so that what was public-facing was not actually indicative of the current state of the game. And I think it was quite deceptive, unfortunately. This is not deceptive. They are being very transparent here. This is a real game, real version of the game running on actual PlayStation 5 hardware. And you can tell because it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Like there's actual artifacting. There's performance hitches and problems and stuff. And I much prefer this, okay? So as much as like we talk about frame drops, performance issues, all that, I just want to be clear. This whole thing, the fact that we can have this conversation now is fantastic and is great. This is how the industry should be. And I'm thankful for IO for approaching it this way instead of being like what a lot of other companies are like and hiding it and being kind of shady with how the game actually is, because this is just way better. This is way better. You can actually operate based on this.
The blends are often very good, and the fast car chase sequence stresses those streaming areas very hard, and mixed with extensive physics destruction system does show key areas the team are likely working on during the next 7 months or so, which manifest as performance issues. The Glacier engine extensively uses and demands fast multi-core CPUs, and here the team have doubled down on their physics engine, animation and destruction system, which from a gameplay, technical and showmanship perspective makes a much bigger impact than simply larger open areas to wander within. The obvious issues in the current build though are easy to spot. Running the video footage shared here through our framerate tools, which I stress is only an indicator of the game's performance and is limited by the video feed itself, as normally we capture all gameplay directly ourselves. But the 4K 60 feed is good enough to gauge the areas of good and bad here. As noted, the base PlayStation 5 version here is capped at 30 FPS and appears to render around 2560 by 1440. Dynamic and reconstruction are also possible, but the video feed and heavy use of chromatic aberration does soften it somewhat. Some aliasing and flicker does crop up, but it's using a temporal AA solution, and mixed with the strong per object motion blur, it is very stable and still looks great, and may possibly have multiple modes come release, as we've seen often this gen, including the Xbox One X and PS4 Pro versions of Hitman 3. But in this gameplay reveal, we get the highest quality option, which seems to peak and trough on the performance scale.
Do you see that? Do you see that? Oh, baby. Oh, that's sub 20. That's sub 20. I understand there's a lot going on here. There's a lot going on here, but that's not really an excuse. Again, like 30 should be the absolute minimum. Anything below 30, and I think it's just unacceptable nowadays.
The entire opening section, slow-paced driving towards the house, wandering around crowded mansions, and even climbing up drainpipes and wisteria vines, the frame times and thus frame rates remain very smooth and evenly paced, bar a few drop frames on occasion or held frames between cuts in those real-time cinematics, very common since the PS4 generation. Once we ramp up the speed and action though, we can see the common cost of data streaming memory management of such dynamic and branching game, allied with physics-based combat, melee and destruction, creates challenges on that 33 millisecond frame time. The destruction is very fitting of Bond and is likely a mix of prefix scripted sections and canned physics sequences that are triggered should you shoot or hit the market to initiate. When this happens, the frame time skips upwards into the 50, 70 and even 100 millisecond range when they do. Now most of these do not look to be GPU based issues, although I am not able to confirm anything here. My educated assumptions are these come from both CPU and memory limits, as the relevant asset, sound, animation and effects are instantiated once set off, and when you create a domino of physics-based destructions, this can then extend beyond the short bouts of drop frames seen here. The airport hangar sequence gives us a good example of the worst case. A huge explosion is started just as young James jumps over and runs onto the runway. This adds more stress as the car's enemies are more all streamed in whilst the physical destruction continues behind. Once we settle into the next sequence being fully loaded and ready, the performance returns to a smooth 30 FPS. We see back and forth during this fight with various bouts of similar hiccups cropping up. The worst case is once Bond gets aboard and commences his luggage inspection, the combination of multiple AI, state models, full physics-based scenery as the plane rocks left to right, all this creates a pinch point for GPU, CPU loads and memory access and bandwidth, and more. And we appear to be fully bound here with a likely double buffered frame rate giving us prolonged periods into the high teens.
Woof, woof, dude. Every time I see it, I'm like, oh God. But just imagine. I'll just say this. Imagine what this would look like if you actually got it running on like a top tier PC. Like I'm thoroughly intrigued to see what this looks like on a high end, like super high end system. Because if you could get this really sharp and at like 90 to 100 frames a second, dude, it would be baller. It would be gorgeous. But as it stands on base consoles, it's struggling to hit that. Now, one of the other things, again, this is a CPU, mainly CPU limited engine because of all the physics stuff, AI simulation, all of that. It's a commonly known thing about the Glacier engine. And as a result, unless major optimizations are made, it's not super clear how much better like the PS5 Pro would run this. It's just not clear. Because again, if the CPU is the main limiting factor, the CPU improvement from like the base PS5 to the PS5 Pro is not massive. So it's going to be interesting to see how that happens. Samuel, thank you for the 5. Hey Luke, what usually happens to a game in the last year of development before it releases? Mainly optimization if it's a good game. Yeah, I mean it's refinements and optimizations is the primary goal. But it depends. Every game is different. Like some games they wrap it up fairly, like most of the core content fairly early, and they start QA in full force 9 months out, a year out. Like I remember, I think it was Ubisoft. Their usual timeline for going from beta to 1.0. So like you think polish is from beta to 1.0, basically. That's where the majority of it happens. And for Ubisoft, their goal was to stay in beta for, I want to say like 3 months was their normal. I was hoping to find the article discussing it, but basically they normally would take like 3 months or something to polish, I believe is what it was. And after the troubles of Star Wars Outlaws, they delayed AC Shadows and pretty much everything else, and they started giving more time to polish. So they tried to improve that from like 3 months up to 6 to 9 months. So they were willing to give the team twice as much time or 3 times as much to make improvements and refinements and polish it up. And that has an actual impact. I mean, that actually does make a difference. So it's different for everybody, for every team. And for Ubisoft, they, and it's something I said in the lead up to AC Shadows, like they can make major improvements really, really quickly, because they have thousands and thousands of people. And so they have tons of people working on it when it's time to polish. So I think it's different for everybody, but typically in the last like 6 months is where a lot of the polish is happening. A lot of those like last minute cuts and adjustments are being made to get it running better and better and better. But to a certain extent, it's also important to understand what can and can't happen. If the internal targets have been 30 frames since the beginning of development, it's unlikely that they're going to magically get this thing running at 60, right? Like if this is a CPU bound game, and they have like, and this is the age-old problem with like Rockstar games, for example. If you have a second of, just think of 1 second, that's the amount of time. And you have 33 milliseconds, okay? So out of this, you have 33 milliseconds. When they say like we're under budget or we're over budget, when you hear game like graphics designers or programmers talking about this, what they mean is that every little bitty thing that's breaking down in the frame is taking a certain amount of time. So it might be that, we have to do the physics simulation at the start of the frame. And maybe the physics simulation takes, if we take the 33 millisecond period and we say that that's 33 milliseconds, maybe the physics sim takes, I don't know, this much time. Takes like 5 or 6 milliseconds. Okay, then we have to do the AI calculations, and that adds another few milliseconds. Okay, so like they start to break it up, and this is the budget. You have 33 milliseconds if you want to hit that frame rate. So you have to break all this down and try to complete these activities faster and faster and faster in order to fit within the budget. Otherwise you have frame drops. And if something like this, you break all these things up and there's different things that you've broken down. We'll just outline it like this. We'll say that this is like the actual rendering or whatever. If any one of these goes over budget and all of a sudden the physics draw an impact of the plane simulation or something is way more intense than you had planned for, maybe this period that was initially 7 milliseconds is now taking 25 milliseconds to calculate. All of a sudden your frame time has gone up and your frame rate drops because it took longer to calculate it. And this is why like internal targets are important, but also like if it's CPU bound and all of this is tied to the CPU, like this doesn't magically get faster just because you have a bigger GPU. Like it's a CPU limitation. That's why going to PS5 Pro might not magically fix it. So the optimizations have to be made on the individual level of each of these activities and tasks either by making the task less demanding, by streamlining certain things, by lowering resolutions, or by lowering the number of physics objects, or by baking stuff in. There's all sorts of different things you have to do to try and make that run better. And it's just really, really tough. So all of this to say, if you budgeted all of these physics sims, the AI calculation, everything around 33 milliseconds, around 30 frames, and that's how it's been from the start of development, like unless you have a significantly faster device that can perform those actions faster, that's the budget you're in. And so going to 60 frames means cutting that frame time in half. And that's very difficult. Like trying to do what you were doing in 33 milliseconds in 17 milliseconds is not that easy. It's quite difficult. So it's just not as easy when people are like, just add a 60 FPS mode. It's really not that simple. And it's very, very complicated. And so my question is just seeing the PS5 version running at 30. I don't think that that's necessarily like game over. I think this is the kind of game where you could have a 30 FPS launch version, and I think it would be fine on a base console. It's not an FPS, so I think it'd be okay, but you have to lock it at 30. I think going down into the teens is just not acceptable. 30 is a stretch. 19 just doesn't work.
Continues throughout the entire battle, with only a few areas of increased or reduced load as we stream into the next section or dispatch a portion of baddies. Again, this is perfectly normal at this stage in the development cycle, with such a long period of optimization and balancing still to come, but does present a clear big challenge from the engine team to streamline the contention here. Once we move into the real-time cutscenes at the end, we again have a smooth 33 millisecond frame time. Further quick cuts at the end of the gameplay sequence show the same bottlenecks and causes as discussed, but again, will be a focus on the team's triage list, I'm sure. Now, of note in the gameplay was this section that appears to be using frame interpolation, suggesting FSR3 or such to target a 60 FPS performance mode maybe, which helps when CPU limited, which we appear to see here. And it may even be an editing error on the footage. I must also applaud them for wanting to show off their vision and quality here with a sequence that could have been pre-recorded and smoothed out as a vertical slice demo for this session. And the amount going on is both impressive, chaotic, and fully dynamic and physics-based, which I hope continues to become a bigger thing moving forward for all games.
Yeah.
For a first look, the gameplay IO showed off gave a flavour of the Hitman that still beats within, but also the expansion they have taken with the Bond franchise and thus design. Sure, we can look at the performance levels at their worst and worry, but that would miss the quality, passion and effort on show here. The team has many months and options to iron out these issues. A small reduction in geometry, moving some physics or AI over to the GPU, gaining back memory space to aid all these worst case moments. The options and methods are vast, and I have confidence the team have many answers. Between now and March 2026, the team will have made huge strides here, I'm sure, and we will certainly see more of the game ahead of its launch. We can easily focus on the areas for improvement, but the bigger risk would be for the team to scale back their ambition, reduce the destruction and dynamism for a smoother but more sterile game. And we all know, James Bond is many things, but sterile and boring isn't one of them. Hold on.
Yeah, and I mean, what I will say is after seeing it, this went from being a game I was just kind of aware of and like, we'll see, to being one of my most anticipated games because I love the vision and I think it makes so much sense. I remember us speculating about what IO could be working on next because it was rumored back in like 22, 23 that maybe they were going to be doing a 007 game. And I remember us all saying the perfect studio would be IO. Like it's just a match made in heaven. Hitman mixed with 007, it's perfect. But seeing them also take heavy inspirations from games like Uncharted is also really, really cool. So I'm thoroughly intrigued. I'm very excited for it and I want to see what they've got. I just want to make it clear to them that you got to get it running at least 30 minimum, lock it and call it a day. And I think that they can get there. They can make major improvements. They know what they're doing. And I think PlayStation also has a lot riding on this. They gave it an entire state of play as a focus. Like Sony, when they know that a game is going to reflect on their hardware, they're There are some exceptions, but typically they are willing to send over engineers to help polish it up and make enhancements and optimizations. They've done it before with games, and so I would be confident that they're probably going to do something similar this time around as well. But I will say, well done, IGN. That was a very good breakdown. It's kind of refreshing to see IGN put something out on a video or a discussion of game fidelity and quality, and it's properly encoded, looks good, and the person really knows what they're talking about. Get this guy to do more stuff. Get him to do more stuff. It's good. Okay. Get him to do more stuff. Have him double check the upload specs for everybody else. Okay. Do that.